Republic of Nigeria, the country had already gone into recession. Price of crude oil, which was the mainstay of Nigeria's economy, had crashed globally, and government had very little to run the nation. The country's infrastructure was at its worst state. Prices of commodities went up astronomically, and businesses were downsizing or closing altogether. In his inaugural speech, President Muhammadu Buhari promised the nation that his administration will diversify the Nigerian economy and pull the country out of recession. With the backing of his Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, a professor of law and one-time Attorney General of Lagos State, a man known for his focus and hard work, and a capable secretary to the government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustapha, the journey so far has been that of fulfillment to the Nigerian people. Men and women with track records of achievement and integrity who have proven themselves in their chosen fields were carefully picked to form his cabinet. His plan was to build Nigeria's economy through infrastructural renewal and development. With his focus on this, President Muhammadu Buhari merged the three ministries directly responsible for infrastructural development. They are the Ministries of Power, Works and Housing, and appointed Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola SAN as Minister of the now Ministry of Power, Works and Housing. The Honorable Minister went straight into extensively studying the three components of his ministry. He went on nationwide inspection tour of facilities under his ministry and started translating the knowledge he had gathered into decisive action.
Well, I think that the context about what we met is to remind ourselves that the Nigerian people asked the last administration to leave. And that must tell you that people don't change what they like. So clearly, what the state of affairs in three ministries were certainly not acceptable to the people of Nigeria. And that's why they changed it. And that's important to set. So when we then begin to talk about how bad things were, it's a context that it wasn't us just saying, oh, we're the new managers and things were so bad. Things were so bad that the Nigerian people asked an existing government in an unprecedented election to leave.
Nigeria had a housing policy like most countries in the world, which is providing affordable housing for its people. However, there was no truly national housing program until now. Today, the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing is building in 33 states of the Federation. Though a pilot program, the scheme has gone through the test of affordability and acceptability. Plans have been put in place to ensure sustenance through the private sector participation.
If the model turns out to be successful, as I said, it's a pilot, and the pilot seeks to achieve two things: to validate our precepts based on studies about what people will accept, what kind of houses will they accept, and then secondly, what kind of houses can they afford. If we succeed in those two areas, then we have a product. Then the way to promote that product is actually to now say, private sector, this is our design, this is our cost. If you can build it, we will buy it. Government will then become the guaranteed off-taker. And anything government usually guarantees that it will buy should sell, in my own experience. How would we buy? We would not necessarily buy by giving you cash. We will buy by strengthening the capacity of the Federal Mortgage Bank, which lends to end users. To say, once you build and Mr. A says he likes it, we will give him a mortgage loan to pay you off. So once you take the money, we will collect the mortgage over 10 years, but you would have been paid, and you can move on to the next side. This must be a buyer, willing seller thing. Once government catalyzes the model, standardizes the form, and achieves a market price, then we can leave Mr. A and Mr. B to say, we want to build, and we have found our land, this is government price, we can deliver it. Once you can deliver it, we have people on the monthly allocation for mortgages under the National Housing, NHL, National Housing Fund, where they contribute. So they will become your immediate customers. And really and truly, that's how the housing market blossoms. Just in Ebonyi, I met some of them who, all of them have the same story to tell. We are happy that this is happening. And when I ask them why, they say, because we are making money. It helps us feed our family. I met one man, I think, in Kirikasama to Unguru, towards Jigawa, towards Yobe State. The name, I think, is Bulus. I met one fellow on shore in, where did I meet him? He came from Abuja. I met him in, I think it was in Kebbi, at a housing site. And they're all around like that. So when I remember those people I met, I think I met another Paul, a painter, somewhere in the southeast. I met a Bube, a shop owner in the southeast. You see, the infrastructure is putting people back to work, and it is showing in the faces of people who are getting the opportunity to work again. Those people had been laid off before. That's why we had recession. Now we have growth. The president's strategy is bang on the money. These are the people he targeted, and the result is a bullseye.
Before the advent of this administration, roads in Nigeria were very bad. Road contractors had been owed for years, and they had abandoned their sites, which led to massive job loss. This has been reversed as the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing has worked out a payment plan with the contractors. This has made them all go back to their sites. Hitherto laid-off staff have been recalled, and thousands of Nigerians have been directly and indirectly employed.
We found about 200 contracts for roads. Contractors had not been paid for any period ranging between 3 to 5 years. They had started laying off workers. Equipment had started idling and grinding to a halt. And that was the seed for ultimate recession that the country entered into. At a time, the country was earning about $100 per barrel of oil, making oil revenues. The budget for roads for the whole country was under 20 billion. And only about 9 billion had been released at the time that I assumed office in November of 2015. What have we done? We have created ways to raise funding. We have looked to raising money from the private sector. So you have the sukuk. We have expanded the budget from roads from 20 billion to 300 plus billion. In the last 2 budget cycles, we have budgeted capital infrastructure at no less than 30% of the total budget, from 15% for almost a decade. Payments have also been made to contractors, and so in the work sector alone, expenditure per budget cycle is now in the region of 200 million, 260 billion per budget cycle from 9 billion. And this is now happening at a time when the country is earning less income from crude oil. The effect is that contractors are back to site. Many of them that I met during my inspection will tell you that the reason they left their sites was that they haven't been paid, and that the reason they are back, which they are happy to be, is that they are now seeing regular payments. One of them actually told me that for the first time in almost 8 years, he's not owing his bank, and that he can actually now go and renegotiate the old, having paid off the old loans, he can renegotiate how he accesses new loans and the terms. That's an economy back on the make. That's the reason why we now have growth away from recession. That's the way we came out of recession, because people started working.
The power sector, that before now had gobbled billions of dollars without achieving much, has now received a boost through careful planning and a methodical approach to solving problems in the sector. Improved government funding and innovative alternative means of funding power projects has increased generation and transmission to an all-time high, while distribution, which is largely private sector driven, is receiving government support through policies that are helping them focus on their core responsibilities. This has translated to better power supply to Nigerians.
In the power sector, we met a generation side struggling to deliver 4,000 megawatt in terms of production. We also met a transmission system that was about 5,000 megawatt. Total distribution was 2,690 in May, and later close to 3,000. The story at that time, and you might recall, was that the distribution companies were complaining that they didn't have power to sell. That was the story at the time. The story today is that generation has reached 7,000 megawatt. Within this year, 2018, there's a potential to add close to another 1,000 megawatt to it. Azura is one of those frontline projects that will deliver that, which is 459. It should come to commercial operation sometime in June, July. AFAM will add another 240. That's about 700 already. Then you have Kashimbila, you have Dadinkowa, you have Kaduna, and so on. So the generation side has grown almost 100%, double, in 3 years. That's what we have done. Distribution has also increased from barely 3,000 to 5,000, but it is now needing to catch up with the available generation. We also met a metering program that had been signed since 2003, 15 years ago. We met it in 2015, at that time 12 years, and all that it did was to end up in court. All sorts of gimmicks around it, where government money, 37 billion, was trapped in a bank and mired in a court case. A judgment of 119 billion naira had been signed against government. What have we done with that? We've removed that judgment. We've negotiated it to nothing. We've converted the trapped money into a loan now to the contractor, who will issue a guarantee to access that money and ultimately deliver meters using the regulatory framework for meter asset providers. That is only a summary, again, of what we have done with power. And we've opened up mini-grid regulations now, so you see a lot of people taking their destiny in their hands now, doing mini-grids. Markets are getting power, schools and universities are going to get power, and so on and so forth.
Careful management of finances for an administration that inherited an economy in recession is crucial. To handle this all-important assignment, President Muhammadu Buhari appointed Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, a chartered accountant and former finance commissioner in Ogun State, as Minister of Finance. Mrs. Kemi Adeosun started by restructuring the Federal Ministry of Finance for efficiency. She formulated new policies and acted on some old ones to ensure that leakages were blocked and promote financial transparency.
We felt that we needed to be more efficient with public money and more accountable with public money because resources were scarce. So we needed to make every naira count. Now, 40 naira out of every 100 naira that government spends is either on salary or a pension. But when we came in, there were no real controls around that area. So the president approved PICA, which is the Presidential Initiative on Continuous Audit. And really all they do is audit and check payroll, audit and check payroll. So as a result of that, using BVM, we were able to identify many duplications and errors and even fraud on our payroll. We removed those people. Some people have been prosecuted. Some people are still in court on those issues. Some people have been removed just from the payroll, and we're even trying to recover monies back from them, and that was because we felt that we needed to be much more accountable and we needed to focus. When we came in, we used to find ministers hiring private jets to travel, so a circular was issued to say no private jets, no first class travel. The most you can travel in is business class, and these are the people that can do business. Everybody else goes economy. So we tried to introduce efficiency so that the public could see that government was trying to cut costs. The government was trying to be more accountable with their money, because the average Nigerian was finding things tough and they were having to make efficiency. So it made sense that government should lead. Government should show that they're efficient. So there was a lot of focus on value for money, a lot of focus on accountability and handling public money properly. That was a great focus of ours. The whistleblower policy has been very popular, had thousands of tips, and lots of money, you know, and I'm sure you all know the Ikoyi case, the high-profile case, but there's also been quieter cases where people have just come in and said, look, this is what's going on in this agency, and we've been able to go there and either stop it or recover money. That's a partnership between government and the people. That's how the whistleblower policy works, and it's energized the people because people are part of it. You know, we're part of the solution, and we need the public support. Government can't do it all on its own. The president or even the minister cannot know what's going on in every agency. So now I have eyes and ears in every agency, and people have to therefore be careful. I like to think of the whistleblower policy in terms of what it must have prevented. Just knowing that somebody could blow the whistle could or should make people a lot more circumspect, which is very, very important.
The Muhammadu Buhari administration has a policy of focusing on non-oil revenue generation. The strategy employed by the Ministry of Finance was to ensure that tax revenue is significantly increased and more Nigerians are brought into the tax net. The ministry then came up with the Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme, VADES, which is a tax amnesty for those who come up within a period of time to honestly declare and regularize their tax obligations. As a reward, such people will enjoy some waivers on penalty. So far, this strategy has been quite successful, as not less than 5 million Nigerians are now in the tax net and billions of naira have been realized.
The response of Nigerians has been really great. And that's one of the things that's given me personally a lot of encouragement. Friends come up and say, look, we don't like you, or we don't like this tax thing, but we'll pay. Because I think there's this sense that we've got to do this. And I think that's great. You know, I get excited when my friends, they send me, some of them are very abusive messages that, Mrs. Tax, but they're paying. So that's great. That's a sea change. We never had that before. Everybody just wanted to evade. Everybody felt, no, I'm not going to pay. So the whole country kind of came together. And it was interesting. We had governors come in, say, how do I declare? We had, you know, small businesses. We had young people come in and say, how do I declare? How do I do the right thing? So that was really good. We started to see the numbers. The increase, the number of taxpayers that the JTB now has gone up from about 13 million to about 19 million. That's a huge increase of individuals coming in and paying taxes. Now, the beautiful thing about taxes, and I don't think beautiful is a word a lot of people would use with taxes, is no matter how small it is, it's the consistency and the regularity of payment that's important, because that allows governments to plan and know that so amount is coming in, and they can then plan projects against it. So we've been very, very encouraged by the response.
The policy of diversification of the economy by the Buhari administration makes it imperative to turn the nation's attention to mining. Nigeria is blessed with lots of mineral deposits scattered all over the country in commercial quantity. However, the availability of oil and gas had distracted successive administrations from focusing on this sector. President Muhammadu Buhari appointed Dr. John Olukayode Fayemi as Minister of Mines and Steel Development. He speaks on this administration's interest in mining development.
The government has done far better than any government before it in terms of financial support. I told you about the budget of this ministry. In 2015, the capital budget was $1 billion. By 2016, which was the budget we were first responsible for, it had moved to $8 billion. And by the 2017 budget, the capital funding, it's about 13 billion naira. That's still not adequate, it's peanuts. But remember, if you're coming from a billion naira capital budget to a 13 billion naira capital budget, there are also going to be challenges of absorptive capacity. for a ministry that is not used to spending that level of money. In addition to that, you have the Special Intervention Fund that Mr. President has approved for mining for the first time. From the Natural Resource Development Fund, we're getting 30 billion naira to engage in exploration, that's research that we talked about, to support small-scale miners and artisanal miners that we also talked about, to enhance the environmental safety issues around mining, and to also ensure that we strengthen relationship with states and the host communities, which has been a source of tension before now in mining. So you have that fund. But in addition to that, we've also been successful in attracting $150 million support from the World Bank, again, to help us build on the successes in the sector and to begin to look at opportunities where people have done exploration, for example, and they no longer have adequate resources to move from exploration to production, to come in at that critical point of proof of concept and say, okay, let's support you, let's help you cross over and actually become a miner, not just an explorer of mineral resources, but an exploiter that adds value to our economy, because mining has a huge bearing on industrialization and manufacturing. Almost all the minerals we're talking about have one form of use or another in the field of manufacturing or industrialization. Talk about bitumen, you cannot construct road without bitumen. Talk about iron ore, you cannot have steel products without iron ore. Talk about barite, you can't work in the oil industry and drill without barite. Limestone, no cement can be produced without limestone. And I can go on and on and on about the minerals that are there. So mining is actually quite key. And it's unfortunate that we lost the plot at a particular point in the growth and development of our country when we discovered oil and we concentrated all our energy on oil.
Even though the price of crude oil in the world market had crashed, the petroleum sector was still the mainstay of the Nigerian economy, hence the sector that needed the most urgent intervention by government. President Muhammadu Buhari decided to appoint Dr. Emmanuel Ibe Kachiku as Minister of Petroleum Resources. Dr. Kachiku, a well-known player in the oil and gas sector in Nigeria, has decades of experience in management in the oil and gas industry. He speaks on how he met the ministry and steps he took to tackle the myriad of problems he met, both in the ministry and the NNPC.
Obviously, what we met on ground was lack of transparency in very many areas of operation. NNPC was really going nowhere, as it were. We met the issue of, like I said, militancy pervading production. At the time we took over was about 800,000 barrels, down from about 2.2 fairly rapidly. Then price of oil downsized from an average of 110 barrels 2 years before and went all the way down to $28 a barrel. And obviously in that environment, even funding federal projects or federal budget was not a thinkable thing. Our reserves were depleting by the day. And then of course, the whole essence of investments with low oil price, with lack of transparency, with militancy and security issues, investments were at the lowest ebb in the country. So that's what we met. So it was basically a crisis amalgam as far as I was concerned.
Far-reaching decisions were taken and new policies formulated to make the ministry more functional. The NNPC was restructured for administrative ease and for it to start posting profits, something that had not happened for quite a while.
Major decisions, some very bullish, some basically creating structural sanity. The first we did was obviously deal with the militancy issue. How do you get back a level of confidence with the owners of the core owners of the resource to believe that you have something in mind? And that took a lot of work, required at a point in time with me going out into the militancy terrain and spending time at great risk to one's life. But that was the only way to get people to accept that really you meant well. And once that held, the next issue was to work with leadership groups in the area, which eventually led to the creation of PANDEF, and then PANDEF coming in to see the president and basically arranging a visit for the vice president to do a tour, all trying to create credibility. And that's what we started doing. And that process is still ongoing in terms of community service. The third was dealing with the behemoth that was NNPC, where things have been done the same way forever, and some of the good policies that that people had put up in the past had been basically revised. We did a first sweep of removing, quite frankly, all the group executive directors within 3 weeks of my resumption, and appointed fresh set of hands within the system, brought in 2 or 3 private sector hands to help beef up the place, and I began to do what I called a weekly podcast for 40 weeks, dealing with institutional problems, and that's where we developed things like the 20 fixes. What were the problems that needed to be fixed? We developed all that, developed solutions to them. And then I began to market the organization in a different way. We began to publish a monthly report so that the Nigerians will know what is going on, good or bad. Let them have information dynamics. So that began to change NNPC. And I'm happy that after 1 year, by the time one left, NNPC declared its first monthly profit of 270 million, which has never been done in their history. So with that, NNPC was carved into about 5 strategic business units with chief operating officers taking responsibility to deliver their own goalposts and be judged strictly on the basis of that. So you had to negotiate the basis on which you served, what you needed to deliver, and we had monthly reviews of whether you were on track or whether we needed to do. So one of the first things that I did was to review private sector participation and get to a point where I had to review prices. I know that many people will sit down today and say, oh, no, you shouldn't have moved price from the then odd 80-something to the 100 and something became, because that affected people. The reality is that if you didn't do that, we would have nothing to be discussing today. But the effect of that took away all the fuel queues that were rampant when we came in and stabilized supply. It removed the subsidy element and gave the government a breathing space to begin to build up reserve once prices went. Then, of course, we dealt with the policy issues, a national oil policy, a national gas policy, moving Nigeria from oil back to focus on gas. And it began an investment drive that took me to the regional headquarters of all the 5 major oil-producing oil companies in Nigeria, not to their local headquarters, but to their international headquarters to get their chairman to align to the strategic vision that I have. The effect of that is that after 3 years, if you look at all the FIDs that have been taken and are in process of being taken, now it's in excess of $40 billion investment in this country. And suddenly, with what we did in terms of the cash call policy, which for the first time allowed them to deal with the $6 billion in back arrears and $1.2 billion in 2016 in terms of arrears of non-cash call payments. We were able to resolve that, sign an agreement, write off about $2 billion in favor of the government, and work out a strategy whereby oil companies could now go back, raise foreign funding, and begin to expand their businesses. So very dramatic things that were done.
With the Buhari administration's focus on growing the nation's economy through infrastructural development, the need to improve the transportation system in the country for ease of movement of goods and services, especially agricultural produce, from their production centers to the markets, became crucial. There was a need for a well-coordinated, multi-modal transportation system to be put in place. To do this job, President Muhammadu Buhari appointed Mr. Chibuike Rotimi Amechi as Minister of Transportation. A former Speaker of the Rivers State House of Assembly and Governor, Mr. Amechi, took up the responsibility with vigor. He speaks on what his ministry is doing with regards to railway development in Nigeria.
The railway transportation was not really in the front burner. It was one of those developmental strides of the last government, but attention was given to it, but not as expected. We had a total of 3,505 kilometers of narrow gauge in the country, built by the British colonial masters. Had deteriorated tremendously. The level of destruction was extremely bad. And the last government had commenced rehabilitation, and they had spent about 90 billion naira. Well, what we did was to do an overhaul of the 3,505 kilometers of railway, of the narrow gauge, and also make a decision. Because what the president decided was, look, you need to go do an audit of the rail transportation because it was essential for economic growth. And if it was essential for economic growth and you need to drive economic growth and create jobs, then you need to fix the rail transportation. We looked at President Obasanjo's rail modernization policy and reviewed it. His policy was, well, fix the narrow gauge for some years and then do away with it. But before you do away with it, start with the construction of the standard gauge. We reviewed it and said, I don't think it's necessary to do away with the narrow gauge. Because if you look at the South African rail transportation, 90% of the rail transportation in South Africa is narrow gauge and not standard gauge. So we decided to adopt a similar policy, not similar to the extent that we will do majority of our rail transport to be narrow gauge. But for now, rehabilitate the narrow gauge while constructing the standard gauge. So we reviewed it and decided that the country was broke. We didn't have enough money to engage in total rehabilitation of the narrow gauge. Let us manage what we saw, what we met, and see how much we can implement the movement of locomotives and coaches on the narrow gauge while fixing the standard gauge. So the first thing we did was first to complete the standard gauge construction that was commenced by President Goodluck Jonathan's government, which was from Idu in Abuja to Kaduna, Rigasa in Kaduna.
The Nigerian transportation system over the years had been dependent on roads. With the need for a multi-modal transportation system in the country, the minister explains the challenges of developing an inland waterway transport system and the floating of a national carrier in the aviation sector. However, plans are being put in place for both sectors to be fully operational.
In 2016, the president and the cabinet approved a total of $195 million contract for a company to help train security in the management of the security of the waterways. Since then, there are forces outside that are making it difficult for, and it's my ministry. I want to train the Navy, I want to train the Army, I need everybody, and we're not getting that kind of cooperation that we need. We believe that once we do that, it will clear the waterway of insecurity. The processes in achieving a national carrier is not for the Minister of Transportation or Minister of State for Aviation to come out and say, I hereby decree a national carrier, and the national carrier starts. So it starts with having a transaction advisor. The national advisor will advise on what process you use. You have to advertise. You have to apply public procurement process. You have to hire. You have to get to ICRC, and all that takes months. You know, when we came, we tried to declare an economic emergency and ask for economic emergency power, and National Assembly refused, and we withdrew. But what it meant in that is to say, look, some parts of this law can be suspended so that the speed at which we want to deliver will be increased. If that had happened, by now we would have been discussing, concluding on the negotiation of the national carrier. So it's in the process of conclusion, but we're still conversing on it.
For a nation that is largely agrarian, the neglect of agriculture to a point where agricultural practice had gone down to only subsistence level in Nigeria was unacceptable to President Muhammadu Buhari. To change the trend and encourage participation and large-scale production of agricultural produce, Chief Audu Innocent Obe was appointed Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. He speaks on what his ministry is doing to encourage participation in agriculture.
One of the major things we did was to get into a partnership with the central bank in a program called Anchor Borrowers. Because one of the problems facing the peasant farmer is that he or she can't impress a banker. Very few banks, a few did. First Bank, Union Bank, they tried. Sterling Bank was making efforts. They won't lend to the farmer. And even if they did, the interest rate was simply outrageous. I mean, how can you borrow at 25% for any productive enterprise, except maybe trading or something criminal? You can't borrow at 25%, apply that money, pay back, and make profit. So they came in with a one-digit interest rate, and we tagged in with them. And we started delivering, not cash, fertilizer, seeds, tractor, pumps to farmers in November 2015. Just 2 days after I came into office, we were in Kebbi. And the response of the Nigerian farmer was simply amazing. That program has continued. As a result, we have cut down rice importation by 75% in a year and a half. We were spending $5 million a day importing rice from Thailand. The effect of that, and this went on for 35 years, was that we were transferring all the wealth of this country to sustain farmers in Thailand and bringing in, along with the rice, unemployment, poverty, disenchantment, and urban migration. Now, people don't connect these things, but we also fell victim to this thing that happened to Africa in 1986. It was dumped on our heads by, unfortunately, our foreign partners, who later confessed that they did wrong, including a former member, MD of the IMF, who wrote a book regretting the structural adjustment program. How could you come to a continent and put in a program that compelled the people to auction the dollar every week? We started in April '86. It was 3 naira to $1. I was in Hong Kong with a friend. I phoned home and they told me the auctioning had started. And I said, aha, this is the beginning of Nigeria's journey to disaster.
Mr. Okechukwu Enalama, an accountant and investment professional with decades of experience in the investment business and investment banking experience with Goldman Sachs and Arthur Andersen, was President Muhammadu Buhari's choice to handle the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. With a full recognition of the importance of galvanizing the business environment in Nigeria and building systems that will encourage micro, small and medium-scale enterprises, MSMEs, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, MITI, has come up with quite a number of policies and innovations, not only to encourage MSMEs, but also to attract foreign investments into the country.
Let me make a couple of introductory points, just to show how. First, as you know, there are 2 ministers in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. You have myself and you have Hajia Aisha Abubakar. As it turns out, my Minister of State, Hajia Aisha Abubakar, is very passionate about MSMEs and has actually taken it as her own area of passion to focus on them. One of the benefits that has come out of that is that working with the presidency, the vice president has been heading something called the MSME clinics, where we are actually going to the various states and taking the services to them. Because if you talk to them, because of their size, many of them can't keep coming to Abuja to find out what's going on. The point being that, this was a case where we had to really take the business and the services to them. And it's been very successful. We've gone to most of the states, and when we go there, we go with the heads of all the agencies, Standards Organization of Nigeria, Corporate Affairs Commission, Bank of Industry, NAFDAC, Financial Affairs, that's the Federal Inland Revenue Services, and so on and so forth. And the reception has been excellent. And what has actually encouraged me in government is that, at times the perception out there is that, most people in government are not really interested in providing services. That hasn't been our experience. What we have found is that the agencies are actually quite, they've been very cooperative. They've really cooperated with us, the ministers as well as the people that are championing some of these causes to ensure that the services get to the consumers. But we're going beyond that. As you know, we have an Enabling Business Environment Secretariat, whose primary responsibility is to say that if you find that there is an area where you are having difficulty, because we're there to make it easier for you to do business, please let us know. We have a web portal. If you go and check pebec.com, at the web portal, you will see how to reach back to us. And MSMEs also talk a lot about funding, access to finance. And so between Bank of Industry and the social intervention funds, as well as the MSME departments of the Bank of Industry, we also have another program which we are championing with the World Bank called the Growth and Employment Project, where we are providing aid, as well as grants, as well as credit, as well as equity, to MSMEs.
For over a decade, Nigeria has suffered a free fall in the Global Ease of Doing Business Index. However, with the application of some of the innovations introduced in the ministry, Nigeria, for the first time in the said period, had gone up over 20 steps. Mr. Enelama explains the concept and how this feat was achieved.
I will tell you this, that if there is one thing, the one thing that businesses demand from government, and that I would argue is probably the singular most important responsibility of government, is to provide the enabling environment for its citizens, for its businesses, for its stakeholders to operate. That's really what the social contract is. That's why we're in government. And so, you know, previous governments had talked about it. But the sad thing, the unfortunate thing was that like Nigeria was sliding down the scale. If you look at the World Bank Ease of Doing Business rankings, we had been going down from where we were in the top 100 10 years before we came to the 10 years between 2006 or so and 2015. Nigeria had been sliding down to where it came down to 169, even 170. You know, and then we basically came with this plan, and the president himself commissioned the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council with the purpose and the objective of partnering with other stakeholders to make Nigeria an easier place to do business. You know, and he also directed the vice president, His Excellency the vice president, to chair that council, with myself as a vice chair and so on. And the good news is that like that council went straight to work, and over the 2 years we've been working, we've seen considerable improvement. One of the more objective indices of that improvement is the World Bank Ease of Doing Business rankings, where when they published the report last year in 2017, for the previous year, Nigeria had moved by 24 places, that's after sliding, and was also adjudged one of the top 10 reforming countries in the world. You know, we had never had it before. And even the World Bank itself, you know, had to applaud the efforts of the country.
The story is the same in all the ministries and departments in the country. A combination of prudent management of resources, corporate discipline, determination to make a change, innovative thinking in government, and most importantly, better government funding of the MDAs has translated to the success story the Buhari administration has become. From every sector of the economy, the narrative has changed from a bleak future to that of hope in the greatness of Nigeria.
My view is that like in 3 to 5 years' time, you'll find that the unemployment issue would have been solved. There might still be some residual unemployment, but it will be minimal because we'll have attacked it from point of view of entrepreneurship, making it easier for the MSMEs. From point of view of industry, we want to go from 10% GDP for industry to 15 to 20%. From the point of view of investment, we want to go from where we're attracting $1, $2, $3, $4 billion per year to where we're attracting multiples of that, 5 to 10 times of that, $20 to $40 billion a year. Like I said, last year we are now 66 billion. This year, first quarter alone, 17 billion. And these are announcements. Clearly, you have to convert them. But by the time we convert them, we certainly will meet our target. We also believe that you will have, crucially, an empowered and a vibrant private sector, you know, that has confidence in itself and in the economy. And they will create the jobs. They will create the opportunities. And then government can truly be an enabler. And our number one objective is to make Nigeria the most attractive country, not just in Africa, but in the entire world to invest.
This country is probably one of the most gifted countries in the world. It has the best manpower you can think of. Nigerians are very education savvy. It has some of the best resources with very little, quite frankly, effort. It's not like building solar power or building nuclear power. These are things in the ground that you go after. It has some of the best topographical terrains for investment. And it has a lot of goodwill. And then it has market in terms of the size of population. So one of the most gifted countries in the world. I think that some of the things that we've done over the last 3 years have laid the foundation. They laid the foundation for managing our scarce resource, for reducing the levels of importation. We need to do more in terms of self-discipline and transparency in how we account for monies that come into the system. We need to see government less as a provider of day-to-day labor, much as it will try. We need to see that happen more at the private sector level. We need to see the states do a whole lot more collaboration for our government to manage the things that are distributed all around. And I think that if we continue on those tangents with some level of peace and stability, yes, we'll arrive there. I have great hope in this country.
The result of what the country is seeing today, the result of the rigorous preparation, rigorous planning that we did in 2015 into 2016, setting out our priorities, setting out our roadmaps for power, setting out our roadmap for road, setting out our roadmap for housing. Everything that we said we will do, we have done. And that is the power of preparation and planning. People didn't understand us then, but now they do. And they're seeing the results, and we need to sustain this.
Inflation is heading down, growth is heading up. We've restructured our debt portfolio, so our debt service costs have started coming down. Our revenues are going up. Businesses are opening up again, investments coming back in, foreign exchange has stabilised, foreign reserves are growing, we started saving again, we just recently put some money into the Sovereign Wealth Fund again. So all the indications are that the strategy is working. The focus we have on infrastructure is stimulating growth. There's more to do. I absolutely accept there's more to do, but everything at the moment is pointing to we're heading in the right direction. We need to continue. We need to accelerate the growth so that people can begin to feel it, but we're definitely heading in the right direction.
With this, Nigerians can clearly see that the promised change has come.
Welcome to Abuja, the capital of the country. Here you will discover Nigeria.